Out is a half-hour multi-part series focusing on the LGBTQ community in Brandon, Manitoba, funded by the Community Radio Fund of Canada. This series will share the difficulties LGBTQ members have faced, the achievements and strides they have made, as well as the support received from the community. We hope the story shared will help those uncomfortable with any LGBTQ lives understand the opposite point of view and become more sensitive to the struggles they face, as well as provide support and information for any LGBTQ members in the area.
You were never intended more. You sold your stock and now you're poor. And though you fought in the war, you never won the day. You took a chance.
Hi, my name is Jan Eck, and I am very proud to help bring to you Out, a new series highlighting the lives of LGBTQ citizens in Brandon, Manitoba. In this episode, we continue our extensive Pride coverage. We had previously covered Brandon Pride Week 2017, which included many interviews with community members and Pride celebrants. Here we begin a two-part focus on the Brandon Pride Committee. From the hard work organizing year-long events to the fruits of their labor, the joyous Pride Week celebrations. In just a little bit, I will be talking with Ken Jackson, former chair and continuing member of the executive. It is well known that Pride celebrations are the signature events for gathering as community, for public education and outreach, as well as for the fabulously creative costuming, top-notch dance parties, and jet-setting. Since the 90s, Pride celebrations have grown immensely, almost all over the world and reaching into smaller and remote communities as LGBTQ citizens express their identities and feel the freedom of being out and proud. Allies and friends come to support their diverse families and communities and promote acceptance and love. While the growth of the Pride community has translated into mainstream political power, recognition, and acceptance, it has also drawn the involvement of mainstream politics and corporate stakeholders into Pride movements. The Pride movement is a huge market that is being given increasing corporate attention. Some celebrants feel Pride has gone too corporate or mainstream and accuse corporate sponsorships of pinkwashing, or the use of LGBT identity to paint or gloss over public perception. Yet, others see LGBT marketing as validation of their identities. The corporatization of Pride is also decried by activists for its mainstreaming of values as a family-friendly event, rather devoid of much of the raucous activities in early Pride history, first and foremost being the idea of liberation, whether through overt sexual display or for direct political action, such as we have seen revisited during the Black Lives Matter sit-down protest of Toronto Pride 2016. The growth of Pride has also resulted in paradoxical situations, as the inclusive nature and mainstreaming of Pride allows participants from many different backgrounds. Many in the Black and people of color queer community are offended by the participation of uniformed police in Pride parades, an issue that has inflamed Pride communities in major cities in Canada in divisive and ongoing debate. It is indeed the growth of the LGBT community, from especially where Canada is growing, among new immigrants, visible minorities, and First Nations communities, that is forcing the hand of a Pride establishment to recognize their perceptions, their experiences and challenges, and their avenues for progressive direction, not only as valid contributions to the LGBT community, but to humanity in general. These conflicts within the Pride community are growing pains that reflect mainstream culture as demographic shifts occur nationally and within communities. That a need for greater understanding between communities is necessary, and it's obvious to many, but it is only through political activism that this opportunity for dialogue exists. My first Pride event was 30 years ago in 1987 in Edmonton. While Pride events, such as raising a rainbow flag, happened in Edmonton as early as 1981, there wasn't a parade there until the 90s after I had left. My first Pride was held in a parking lot outside of the legendary Flashbacks nightclub, a Sunday afternoon event of games and frivolity. I am nostalgic at the naivety of how such simple entertainment was sufficient and perfect. Now, while historic, it was simply quaint. I remember a cool casualness as well, despite the enormous fights we were immersed in, from the onset of AIDS and HIV to emerging political battles in gaining human rights and recognition. It was like, no biggie, we got this. But it is when I moved out east and witnessing Toronto Pride in 1990 that I realized the enormity of the event and that the LGBTQ community was diverse, extremely diverse in every color or ethnicity, religion, creed, background, and way of life. A few years later, I was celebrating Toronto Pride among hundreds of thousands in an incredibly safe environment. It was a joyous community that had a sizable volunteer pool to ensure awesome events and also had an emerging organized political power to tackle the issues of the day, such as the AIDS, HIV crisis, and marriage equality. I haven't been able to separate Pride from politics since. When I attended my first Pride in Brandon in 1999, the contrast was startling, and a great reminder of the disparity of conditions in the lives of LGBTQ people across the nation. I learned of the event through a gay directory, a travel book, if you will, that had a number that might have been for Globe, gays and lesbians of Brandon everywhere, if my memory is correct. And as I was planning to visit Manitoba at that time, I called that number and stated my intention to the volunteer attending the line. And instead of providing me simple information, it was necessary that I would meet some of the volunteers at a coffee shop beforehand, in order that they may be assured that I was not a malicious person. So I was vetted for my very first Brandon Pride, which was a social at the Canadian Inns. It was very thrilling to be at the social, meeting many, many new people, despite it seeming that a few too many people were actually very worried about being seen at the event. After several years of living in Toronto's Church Street Village, I must have become a bit delusional to the extent of the closet in more rural places. I thought Brandon might be a bit more open, but at that time I was wrong. I moved to Brandon in 2003 and attended several Pride socials from then on at the Victoria Inn, and people were having much more relaxed, honest fun. This community has been organizing consistently since, thanks largely to the always present CIRC and their institutional support, and events, though always small and quaint, gradually grew. At some point, Pride also included a picnic in one of the downtown parks, and soon enough, a parade. But now I'm talking about very recent history, and that includes the wonderful work of the Brandon Pride Committee. This year, Brandon Pride grew exponentially, with a week full of packed events and a Pride parade that was estimated at 1,000 strong. It was really an accomplishment for the committee, and I could tell that they were thrilled beyond expectations. There are growing pains, concerns to get to work on, but they are good problems, mostly about the need for bigger things. Larger parade staging area, a bigger and badder sound system, and with the great turnouts for all of the events, perhaps more programming. These are challenges that indicate an overwhelming positive response from the community. So, to tell us more about the Brandon Pride Committee, we interview Ken Jackson, former chair and current executive member. In this episode, we begin an overview of Brandon Pride and start into some reflection of the events of Pride Week 2017. All right, I'm speaking with Ken Jackson, former chair of Brandon Pride. Could you just tell me a little bit about yourself before we get into this interview?
Well, like you said, my name is Ken Jackson. I'm former chair of the Brandon Pride Committee. I've been in that position or other positions on the executive for probably close to 10 years. I'm also a former BU graduate from here in Brandon University, and currently I'm a teacher assistant at Crocus Plains High School. I'm also one of the facilitators for the school's GSA as well, too.
When did Brandon Pride form, and what was Brandon doing for Pride before?
It's been about 10 to 12 years, I think, since Brandon Pride has existed as Brandon Pride. There were other organizations I know in the past. I do know that there was a group that was known as Globe here at the university years before that. And it does actually have a longer history, but I would say probably in the last 10 to 12 years, it's been more of a public entity as opposed to sort of an internal organization just in the LGBT community in Brandon.
Is organizing Brandon Pride Week the reason for being, or is there a greater mission objective? Do you have a mission statement?
First of all, I think a lot of the Pride, I think we're sort of in the same boat as a lot of other Pride organizations. Of course, the big event is the Pride Weeks in June. There has been a lot of endeavors on part of Pride, as well as in other centers, to try to do things that can be supportive of the community throughout the year. So in case of Brandon Pride, we have done other events in the past, one of the most notable being the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which we show in February, right around Valentine's Day. But we're also definitely active socially on social media and stuff like that throughout the whole year, whether it's posting international news on the site or just keeping the community abreast of things that we're trying to plan.
Well, yes, you mentioned Rocky Love, but you organize a branded contingent for Winnipeg Pride as well, as an example of little things we shouldn't forget to mention.
Yeah, this is the second year, I believe, that Brandon Pride has marched in the Winnipeg Pride as a group. We also have had, in Steinbeck's first 2 years as well, we've had representation in that Pride event as well, too. Fully acknowledging that there are people in the greater provincial and, I guess, national areas that used to come from Brandon that have an interest in Brandon. I know that when we host the Pride here, we do get former residents, people that grew up here, starting to come back and celebrating Pride in their former home communities.
So tell us about the committee, what everybody does and how often that you meet, and is it volunteer? Can anybody join?
It's totally volunteer, and everybody is welcome. Right now we have basically sort of a 4-person executive, chair, vice chair, treasurer, and secretary, and then we have members at large, and those members at large can participate in a number of ways, whether it's coming to the meetings, discussing ideas, discussing issues, or we have a group of people that, for example, this year were more interested in volunteering at the different events. So there's a lot of different ways that people can come out and support Pride or be a part of the planning groups. This year there was a really concerted effort, I know, to meet once a month throughout the year, and then if we needed more meetings, especially closer to the time of the event, then we could do that as well too. It's usually right around the first of the month.
How is it funded? How is everything paid for? Is it charitably operated, or is there other funding? Is it a non-profit organization?
Well, I definitely say we're probably close to it being a non-profit, and that's something that has evolved and keeps evolving as Pride goes on. I would say probably when we first started, I don't know if we got a donation from someone, but it was basically us trying to figure out ways to raise money to put on an event. And I've known a few years where people have put stuff on their credit cards and kind of just to get that kind of event going here in Brandon. I actually should say though that when I talk about the funding and stuff of Pride, that those things are obviously changing too, and this year was a good example. We saw a lot more assistance from groups like MGEU and Toronto Dominion Bank and the City of Brandon, and then private donations as well. Whether it was from a business like Kuiper's Bakery donating supplies for the barbecue on the Saturday, or different groups like that also have more and more are coming out and helping us to put on the event like we do.
So you're finding that some of the things that you need to pull off the events are just being donated to you rather than having a budget for it?
Probably originally, yes. Though now we are definitely making a very much more considered effort to have a budget to be upfront with how things are paid for and expenses. So we have this last year, we had a really terrific young woman that took on the job of treasurer, and she kind of kept the group on track as to budget and being responsible and upfront with that.
What about key partnerships now, such as Cirque? They do quite a bit for Brandon Pride as well.
Yeah, Cirque has been a long-time partner, and Pride very much goes along with their mandates and mission statements within the City of Brandon too, as well as other communities. So yeah, they've been a very, very large supporter of us. They've given us places to meet as well as access to supplies and stuff like that too. So yeah, very big partner for us. As Pride evolves, MGU, Toronto Dominion this year came on as really big sponsors for us and partners with us. I think in their own way, the City of Brandon too is also starting to come on board as a partner, especially for the Pride events. And I think those kind of partnerships hopefully will just keep growing. BU LGBT, Brandon University Student Union, as well as there's now an organization through ACC. We've been allowed to freely advertise with Winnipeg Pride through their products and stuff too, in their own event too. So the different Pride organizations are definitely starting to create a network where we can support each other as well too.
Okay, let's move on to talking about the amazing schedule of Pride Week events of 2017. It started off really awesome with the media launch announcing the Grand Marshals for the parade did really well with Brandon Sun, for example. So that, all of a sudden there was this huge buzz that was kicking off before anything even started.
This was our second year with electing a Grand Marshal for the Pride March, and this year was very successful. Amelia and Margaret being so just intricate in the community and being well known in the community, and it was really great seeing them be able to be themselves and lead us in that march. I should say too, like when we started Pride, we were that one-day event, so we've come a long way in a short few years, going from, a social on a Saturday night in a community hall to having like a full week of events, coming a very, very long way in a very short period of time to do that kind of thing. So yeah, it was great having Amelia and Margaret up there with us, and I know there's a lot of other people in the community that I know will be considering again in the future, hopefully to fill that role in coming years. The media is definitely, I think, feeling a lot more freer to report on things like Pride events. Again, it's come a long way. Winnipeg Pride just celebrated their 30th year, and I know the first year that they did a Pride March, they had people in with bags on their head because they still weren't able to be out in the community. So, it's come a long way.
All right, so the first event of the week was Monday's flag raising at City Hall, and Mayor Rick Kress was there to give a speech as well as local organizers.
That is sort of a simple event to put on. It doesn't take a huge amount of physical effort to raise a flag, but in some ways that's probably for me one of the most important events, because that was the city of Brandon acknowledging the LGBT community in Brandon, and that happened under previous Mayor Sherry Decter-Hurst for the first time, and now Rick has done it with us twice, and to me that's a big symbol for the LGBT community in Brandon. It just makes me proud every time I see that flag go up in June.
Last year you had the opportunity to meet the creator of the flag too.
Yes, Gilbert Baker, I did get a chance to meet with him when he was visiting Brandon. It was sponsored through MGEU and the unions, and I think that made it quite a bit more special to raise that flag, having met him and having heard him speak on some of the first Pride events that he was part of, the fact that he knew Harvey Milk and was asked to create this image for the LGBTTQ community. It added a personal touch to raising that flag every year. And unfortunately, of course, too, we were sad to lose Gilbert this year, last February, but he's left us with something that's going to go on and on.
Tuesday, we had a couple of events. We started with Lunch and Learn with Ray Hutton, who discussed accessibility sports programs for trans people. And that was really well attended.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about Brandon Pride is our combination of both the fun and the more serious or educational events. And on Tuesday, we did have kind of a combination of both. Ray is formerly from Manitoba, Manitoba, and he was presenting on his area of grad studies, which is looking at transgender in high school sport. And I'd also had the chance to speak to him with the Crocus Plains GSA a time before that. And I think that's kind of a good example of things that Pride can be supportive of planning, both during Pride and throughout the whole year, is when we find about work like Ray's, helping him get the access to the information that he needs to, and feedback that he needs to hear as part of his study, and at the same time he's bringing information to us and to the community. I knew that I learned a lot from talking with him personally as to what it looks like to be a transgender student in our high school system. I was just going to say that if anyone's interested to hear more about Ray's study and learn a bit more about transgender in sport, I know that the CERC offices definitely can put people in touch with him or give him an access to know more about his area of study, which I think is really important.
Moving on, that evening, Tuesday evening, we had the trivia night with Kate and Aaron, right? The host Kate and Aaron at the Double Decker. Those were really hard questions. I attended that one. I think I lasted the first round and then I sort of gave up.
Yeah, Kate and Aaron are great supporters, and Kate's definitely would end up supporting us throughout the week through the karaoke, as well as she's one of the curators for the Art Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba, and they did an event for us as well too. For me, Pride has always been a combination of the serious and the celebration. So I think that Tuesday is a pretty good example where we start with Ray and learning about transgender in high school sport, but we also have an event where the community can just come and let your hair down and have fun. And I know that Kate always endeavors to add some LGBTTQ questions into the mix. So in a way, we're also still learning a little bit too. So
Wednesday was movie night at the Evans Theatre. We got to see Fire Song, which was a pretty inspiring movie, a Canadian-made movie, a First Nations subject, First Nations director, Garnet Jones, I believe his name was. No, I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, Firesong was quite an event, and it was really quite amazing to have the director there to do a Q&A as well too, and that was it was really great teaming with the Evans Theatre there, who also help us throughout the year with things like Rocky Horror Picture Show and bringing something to Brandon audiences that they wouldn't normally see on a regular basis. And then on top of that, getting to talk to the director and talk about LGBTTQ issues in the Indigenous communities and what that looks like to an Indigenous Canadian.
There was an event at the library, storytelling.
We did a Pride Story Morning at the Brandon Public Library. I think it was one of those events where it really seemed that there was an interest from their side or their perspective of doing something for Pride, and it kind of got started a little bit because of the move in certain centers like Winnipeg to there's been a number of centers that have done drag queen readings at Public Library. I know in Winnipeg the number of the local drag queens and performers came in and read stories to children. Ours wasn't quite drag yet. Who knows, but that could come in the future. But I had the chance to go in, and with one of their programmers there, we took part and planned the early years children's reading section. So we had, I think it was 9 children that day, and they're all under the age of kindergarten, which is really kind of cool. So we found books to read them about that have a message of inclusion, including a book called This Day in June, which is specifically about Pride and what Pride might look like to someone of that age. And then we did a rainbow craft with them as well, and gave them their own little Pride flags. So I know a couple of them, the parents were going to be bringing them to the parade that Saturday, so they would have their own Pride flag for the march. It was really quite something, a very wide mix. So we had kids that were quite obviously from different ethnic families as well too. So I think that the better our younger people are educated as to what the LGBTTQ community looks like, why we do this in June, as well as when they get a little older, like learning about LGBTTQ issues and seeing news stories and that kind of thing, that we're going to have a much more inclusive society, a much more compassionate society. And I think this was a great way of starting that off.
Making your mark reception at the Art Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba. That was an also really well-attended event, and there's so many youth participants in that one as well.
That was really neat because the Art Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba this year encouraged queer artists to participate in this exhibition, as well as young people. I know that a number of the kids from GSA at Crocus had pieces of artwork, of their artwork, and just giving them sort of a blank palette in which to showcase first of all, their artistic abilities, but also basically putting themselves out there and just putting themselves up on a gallery wall. I know some of the kids that I work with at the high school level, that's a pretty big step, is doing something like that. So that was a really cool event, and I'm hoping that we can hopefully partner in some way with them in the future. I
really appreciated the campy additions by the Brandon Pride Committee, actually.
It was funny. I actually couldn't, because of a work conflict, I couldn't go to the opening, and I went a little while later and viewed the exhibition after Pride was done, and I was quite proud of my fellow Pride members for putting themselves out there too.
Some clever things.
Yeah.
All right. That same evening, that was Thursday night, this June. There was karaoke again at Double Decker. So Double Decker was an awesome partnership this year as well.
It's a really good venue with us, Forrest. They've been on board with us now for a few years, and also allowing us to create gender inclusive washrooms within the facilities, and being a very good supporter of the Pride movement here in Brandon. And again, it's kind of a fun evening where people can come out, kind of let their hair down, be themselves. And they supported Pride both at Trivia Night and at Karaoke quite successfully. And I know we're going to talk how Pride markets itself now through the T-shirts and stuff like that as well. And that kind of gave us an access to show those to the community too, and get support that way.
Well, thank you, Fez. Thank you, Alan from Double Decker. Friday night, board game night. That was the I Want This Stuff?
Also known as Board Game Empire, or I Want That Stuff. Pride has, for the last number of years, has endeavored to not just have events that you have to be over 18 to go to. And the Games Board Night is one of those nights where we can open it up to the wider community. And I think there was about 60 people came to the board game night, and a lot of them, again, were our under 18s. A lot of our high school kids came in, and that's really neat, giving them the type of event that they can participate in, as opposed to the social or bar events. So again, Pride trying to create something for the community as a whole, and look at the different areas of our LGBTTQ community that want events and stuff to go to.
Oh, great. So we reached the big weekend, and it started on Saturday with the Pride March that began at City Hall with speeches from organizers, from politicians, from our grand marshals. It was packed down at City Hall. It was overflowing, actually.
Yeah, we've kind of in 3 years have gone from the estimated 250 to 500 to this year they were estimating that we had about 1,000 people in the march. The one thing I've enjoyed about the march is that we call it a march, and I think it's got a very much maybe a bit stronger of a personal feeling to it than I've been to Toronto for their Pride Parade, and I've been to Winnipeg a number of times. That was the first one that I had ever gone to, was Winnipeg's. And it's funny, there's something about just walking with other people, no floats, no vehicles blasting stuff and, all that kind of thing, but just walking with each other, I think, is a very strong personal thing for me. And marching from City Hall again was awesome. We did the speeches. I think this year too it shows that there's always things we can do better, because I know next year we're going to be I know the Pride Committee wants to look at having better sound capacity and those kinds of things.
There are some glitches,
but that's how you
grow.
That's how you grow, and that's how you learn. I don't think there's an event planned anywhere that doesn't have those glitches, and you learn from one year to the other, and that's one of the things we need.
I think you need a bigger staging area. We were a little worried about just overflowing over to the street, and it was like, where do you do that, though?
I don't know. It's
That's a hard one.
It's a good problem to have.
It's a great problem.
It's a great problem to have. And that's one thing I think that I know the first Pride, I'm encouraging everybody to check out the Pride Facebook site over the next couple of weeks, because there will be the annual general meeting coming up as well as our first meeting. So I believe those are coming up in the first couple of weeks of September. I don't think we've finalized the date yet, but that's where the planning starts. So I know we're going to be addressing, looking back at this past year, what worked, what didn't, what do you think we need to change, what worked, what can stay the same, or and that's a good point to bring up, is the possibility that we may be overgrowing our facilities,
which is awesome. It's just incredible. So yeah, the march was incredible. I was racing all up, back and forth, trying to get introduced with everybody I could. The vibe was really nice. It ended up at Stanley Park.
I would like to see a year or two that when we get to Stanley Park, we can have those water parks going for the kids, given hopefully we get good weather like we've gotten the last few years. No, the march to Stanley Park was awesome. We saw groups like Manitoba Teachers Association, MGU, local politicians, members of our mayor walked with us, and it's a really important to event to see that how strong an ally group that we have in the Brandon. So you don't have to be a member of the LGBTTQ community to come out and join us in that, and a lot of our friends and family and supporters come out that day too. So the park event is sort of a free event that we do. This year we were very lucky to have different performers with us, including the Sunshine Girls from Winnipeg, under the directorship of Levi Foy. We also had Ray Spoon, which was a big coup for us, and getting a performer of her caliber to join us and perform for us. It also is a great opportunity for organizations to have informational booths and tables, and to allow, especially my professional world, it's a great place for the young person who may be still questioning to come out and get a lot of information, and probably be one of their first times exploring the LGBTTQ community in Brandon. So, and the barbecue itself, we've done it as a kind of as free, and it's sort of our way of giving back into the Westman Brandon community.
That was former chair and current executive member Ken Jackson, and we will continue this interview in a forthcoming episode. But for now, it has been a pleasure to bring to you this episode of Out. I have been your host, Jan Eck. Thank you for listening to CJ 106 FM.